Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you my very first The Nightmare Room book series review. In the first book, I'm going to start off with this little 12 book series, or I guess 15 book series, is Locker 13. Now, recently I've been wanting to read all the superstition based stories that R.L. Stine has his name attached to, just to kind of see which one's the best. And after reading this, my very first Nightmare Room book I've ever read, I never read the books as a kid. I maybe watched one episode as a child, renting it on VHS. So this is a completely new experience for me. After reading this, I think I can safely say this is the best superstition story R.L. Stine's ever done. Really, this just is really good. There's a lot of deep messages here. There's a moral question in play. There's good character dynamics. There's characters that learn from mistakes. Characters go on an emotional roller coaster where you root for them, and then you root against them, and then you root back for them again. It's a wild ride of a book, I would say. There's a lot of gruesome moments in this story that I really enjoy as well. And this story is like 140 pages, and there's a lot of stuff that happens. So I'm just going to touch the surface from memory on this book. But off the bat, I highly recommend that you check this out, especially if you like omen based stories. If you are a fan of the Series 2000 books, honestly, I think The Nightmare Room might as well just be the continuation of Series 2000. You know, Series 2000 was supposed to be 40 books. Yeah, I guess if you count Adventures of Shrinkman, there was 26 actually released. Just go ahead and add on The Nightmare Room because it just literally feels like what Series 2000 was doing. Check this series out if you're a Goosebumps fan. Seriously, check this out. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So this kid named Luke is his first day in 7th grade at this middle school, or I guess they call it in the book junior high. And the very first chapter kind of goes into being the first day of 7th grade. Luke has this superstition because he has a history of bad luck in his life, and he wants all the good luck he can get because he has three goals. He wants to have this like animation that he's been working on noticed and finishing that. He wants to do well and join the basketball team, and he also wants to join a swimming team, the swimming team as well. So there's like three solid goals there that he sets up for himself. But off the bat, the school year starts kind of on a sour note where he gets assigned the locker with the number 13. And his locker is a solo locker, pretty much by itself away from everyone else's locker. And he's upset about it. And, that's how basically the first chapter goes. And then the second chapter, it skips like 2 months. And he is trying to try out for the basketball team. And he kind of reveals that he has this lucky rabbit foot that he squeezes 3 times for good luck, and he kind of relies on luck more than his skill because I guess that's how he's programmed. And as you read the book, you're going to kind of get this sense that he's kind of neurotic about superstitions and stuff. So he's trying out for this basketball team, but there's this kid named Stretch, and he's like this really tall, mature for his age, I guess, with his like build and his body build. He's tall, he's muscular, he's fit, he's good at basketball, pretty much everything that Luke isn't. And of course, Luke gets hazed by Stretch and his cronies trying to make him shoot a basket and kind of embarrassing himself. He misses a few and then he finally sinks one, and he gets essentially embarrassed. And after he gets embarrassed, he sees Stretch trying to tie his shoe, and he gets this impulsive idea just to throw the ball at him, and it hits Stretch in the head, makes his nose bleed, and Stretch comes over to him and essentially threatens him. And then the basketball coach stops the fight and says, "Take it outside. Both of you go outside, pair up, and work on your skills with each other." And when he goes outside with Stretch kind of gets some retaliation on him for being a basketball in his face. So Luke gets pretty much mopped on the basketball court outside. And then comes to his rescue his friend Hannah. Now, Hannah is described to be this girl who is just completely lucky. She's one of the luckiest people that Luke knows. And Hannah sticks up for Luke and challenges Stretch to a game of like 20 shots, and whoever makes the most is better. And Stretch has to admit that he lost to a girl. And Stretch, of course, takes this idea because he's like, you know what, you're a girl. I'm not gonna be able to lose to you. That's just how Stretch thinks, right? And Stretch tries to make a few in a row, and of course he misses after a few. And then Hannah gets the ball and sinks like 10 in a row, and like completely shaming him. And she gives him the ball back, and he tries it again. And then she sinks even more, like 8 more in a row. And then Stretch runs off like a little baby and makes fun of Luke in the process. And he goes inside, and then Hannah sinks a couple more shots and said, look, I made all 20. And Luke's like, how do you do that? And she goes, I'm just lucky. It's all luck. And Luke kind of gets kind of jealous about Hannah's luck. He kind of starts seeing that spiraling with Luke. And then it kind of fast forwards a little bit in the story where Luke is at his locker at locker 13, and he tries to write Lucky 13 on the locker, maybe to, you know, cure his jinx because he's had like just a series of bad luck. And he sees this black cat come out of his locker, and that creeps him out, and he doesn't know what to think of it. And he's just kind of afraid of his locker at this point. So after seeing the black cat, he gets really superstitious. He grabs his, you know, rabbit foot and squeezes it, and he doesn't really think anything of it. He tries to go talk to his teacher, who is really the only nice teacher and the nice adult figure, I guess, in his life in this story. And she wants to know about his animation project, and she kind of knows that he's really good with computers and stuff. She seems really supportive, and Luke kind of talks about that relationship and how much it means to him. So he has a little bit of depth to his character and his monologue at this point of the story. But, of course, still, Luke is kind of at bad luck. He hasn't had much inspiration to do the animation, so because he's so focused on sports, which cuts into the swim team tryouts, which he tries to go try out for the swim team. And, of course, Stretch and his cronies are also part of the swim team as well. And he embarrasses himself and like belly flops into the pool, and he comes in 7th place and becomes an alternate, and he's just really down on his luck. And he gets home, and it's nearing his birthday, and all he really wants is just some luck and some of Hannah's luck. Hannah tries to get him to go to the mall with him, get him to go to the mall with her, so I guess they can pick out his birthday present, but he decides to bail and stay home, work on his animation project. And he gets a call from her saying that she won basically a free SUV from a contest at the mall. So he jokingly makes a comment saying, you know what, I wish that I can have your luck for my birthday. And she kind of scoffs a little bit, and she ends up hanging up the phone, having to go, and Luke continues working on his project and goes to bed. And then then he has like a little nightmare sequence, and then he wakes up and goes to school the next day. He goes to his locker, and he tries to make sure that nothing's in his locker this time. And he searches around his locker. There's no cat. Okay, so it seems all is normal. And then something falls out, and he picks it up, and there's this little yellow skull with red eyes. And there was these little red eyes that were hinted in the story beforehand, kind of dealing with the locker. But Luke puts his skull in his hand. He's like, what is this? And he puts it in his pocket and doesn't think anything of it. So he goes down to basketball practice, and he pretty much is making every shot, and he kind of embarrasses Stretch, and he gets a lot of people to start backing him. He seems to like have friends. Like, people are starting to really respect him. But then when he sees Hannah later on, Hannah's really quiet. And Hannah's watching the game, and I guess Hannah's trying to play her basketball game, and she's just having an off game. and he's watching her game, and he goes to talk to her, and it seems like Hannah's hinting at something that, I had this good luck charm, I've been missing it, have you seen it anywhere? And this is where Luke gets kind of unlikable. He sees that Hannah's having an off time, but then Luke kind of makes a selfish decision to keep the skull that she's talking about, because he believes that it's his turn to have the luck. So Hannah, from this point on, starts to really have some really awful things happen to her. She gets like a face rash. She injures her ankle, and she has to get like pus drained out of her ankle. It's really awful. She's on crutches, even wheelchair bound, and it's going to come into effect when she wants to go to this like junior high sleep out thing out in the woods where they all stay up all night and have like a big party. She feels that it's going to affect that, and of course she can't play basketball. She's lost her luck. She's having a lot of these terrible things happen to her. But meanwhile, Luke, he's making friends on the basketball team. He still has that alternate thing going for him. But his parents also won this like sweepstakes thing as well. They won like a free dinner at this restaurant, and all this luck is coming to him. He can't lose. He gets so lucky that he flies through his art project and almost finishes it. He gets this opportunity where his teacher is going to hook him up with a job, and the animation that he's working on, he can get paid $1,000 for it by submitting it to this guy, as long as he gives it by the deadline. So Luke's having all this luck coming to him, but he has every intention to give the charm back to Hannah at some point to give her luck back. But when it comes to this big game where he really wants to show everyone that he can, be the star of the show, he's kind of already showed up to all of his friends, he starts having an off day. And he realizes his luck's turned for the worst. He has a really nasty concussion scene that's really graphic and really disturbing. The first concussion thing is where he hits his head with this other player, and then he runs off and tries to find his skull, even though everybody's telling him to like stay put. They're going to call an ambulance. And he goes and tries to find his skull, and he sees it in his locker, and the skull has changed shape. And he realizes that maybe the skull is bad luck. Well, then he wakes up from like this like concussion dream, and he's still concussed on the floor, and they said they're going to call an ambulance, but he just wants to go to the locker room, and that's when he starts seeing these visions. He sees these visions like he saw before. We saw these little red eyes. Maybe he was cursed with something. And he puts two and two together, and he kind of realizes that his luck has changed a little bit. And then Hannah, of course, confirms this with him, saying that, the luck doesn't last forever. And she kind of brings this up in a scene early on. I kind of skimmed over here. There's like this downhill roller derby scene where Luke gets really ballsy, I guess, and blindfolds himself to race down the hill blindfolded into oncoming traffic against Stretch. And that was just really crazy. But now essentially Luke is cursed too. And when Hannah tells Luke, they go back to his locker and they see this black cat come out of the locker, and the black cat forms into this being known as the Fate Master. And the Fate Master essentially reveals that they have to pass on the skull to Stretch next. And the kids don't really have anything in it for them to do so other than to try to get the Fate Master off their backs. Well, the Fate Master essentially reveals that they're going to have bad luck forever to pay for all the good luck they did. And how it works in the book is like they'll have the charm for like a month or two, and then they're pretty much given bad luck for the rest of their lives after that. So they're going to have to endure this punishment and somehow give it to Stretch. And there's another moral dilemma here where you kind of start rooting for Luke again and Hannah at the same time. You're like, they're both Hannah's like, well, you have no choice. And it's revealed that Hannah was the one that gave Luke the skull. So you really don't like Hannah at this point either. But you start to realize that maybe the both of them are questioning whether they should give it to Stretch and pretty much curse him. And there's that moral dilemma where Luke kind of flirts with the idea, but can't really go through with it. He can't bring himself to do it, and he wants to find a way to outsmart the Fate Master. So he comes up with this idea. He takes this idea from Stretch, who has changed throughout the story as Stretch has seen Luke kind of evolve. He's become more friendly to Luke, and he offers Luke a pretty nice sentiment of words, saying that no, you're really talented. You know, you don't need luck. You have the talent. You have the skill to do these things. And Luke doesn't at first believe it, but thinking back on it, he thinks that maybe if he can try to just tough it out and keep the skull and somehow prove to the Fate Master that he has skill and doesn't need luck, somehow that's going to defeat the Fate Master. And he tries in his multiple steps. He tries to prove it in basketball. He's already tried and he failed with the concussion. Then he tries with his art project, and he learns that his art teacher had moved away, and he now needs his art given with this new art teacher to this animation guy that because he's been working on it for a good amount of the book, so he can get that money and prove that he put his hard work and diligence into it. And so he tells the new teacher to wait, and he goes back home, and he realizes that the power's out from a tree. There's a tree scene. Like I said, I'm skipping over a lot. There was a tree scene with a tree fell on top of the house, and the parents were at the hospital during his basketball game because the father got injured, and the power was out because of the tree fall, and he couldn't move it to a hard drive thing, or I don't know what to call them. Not a floppy disk, but like a junk drive. He couldn't put it on a junk drive, but then he remembered he already had a copy on the junk drive, so he takes it and takes it back up to the school, and it just shows glowing red eyes and a blank black screen. The teacher's like, really? You made me wait for this? And Luke has to choke and admit that, yeah, this is what it is. And then he realizes he can't prove the Fate Master with his art. So he has one last thing he can do. One of the swimmers got ill, and he's an alternate, so he gets told by his swim coach to come to the swim meet, and he goes, and there's a really disgusting vomit scene, and he has one last chance to prove it, or he's pretty much just going to be eternally trapped with Hannah. And what happens is this big climax unfolds during the swim meet, where essentially the Fate Master tries to boil him and throw sea monsters into the pool to get him, but maybe Luke pulls it out, and maybe there's a happy ending. And I guess the very last sentence is kind of a wet fart when you think about it all, because especially the characters have grown to this point where they're like, we don't need luck anymore, and after you think that maybe everything's okay, you get a wet fart last sentence, and that's how the book ends. So, yeah. So let's get to the positives about the book. I think this book is mostly positives. I actually only have 1.5 negatives with it. Luke's a great character, ups and downs. You root for him, you root against him, then you root back for him. He has a very good moral compass, some really honest monologue. He has some sympathy behind him. And this also stems to Hannah. You like her, then you don't like her, then you like her again. Same thing with Stretch. You don't like him, and then he becomes okay. He gets kind of humbled by Luke, and then he becomes a nice guy. So you even like Stretch. Everybody's a good character in terms of the kids involved. The Fate Master is a really creepy villain. He essentially wants to torment these kids and eternal bad luck, and he gets enjoyment out of it. He's kind of sadistic. He's my type of villain. I really love the Fate Master in this book. He's very sadistic. He's not willing to play mind games with the characters. Some of the things he does pretty much is Final Destination stuff. The villain in those movies is death. The Fate Master is essentially playing death in Final Destination. It's a great setup, great concept. I really dig it. Yeah, Luke's kind of neurotic, but the superstition angle done here is really effective. And I think that plays it's effective because the way the characters play into the superstitions and the morals and cursing people, and then deliberating whether to curse somebody else to maybe save yourself. Really deep thinking thoughts in this book, using the superstition, and that's why I love it so much. Because the stuff that happens to these kids is really, really sad when you think about it. Knowing how the book unfolds and how the plot says that, like, Hannah had to give it to Luke, and then Luke is pretty much forced to the dilemma to have to give it to Stretch, and he doesn't want to. It's really sad. It's a very, emotional, scary, and thought-provoking book all at the same time, and that's what makes this story work for the majority of the read. The story does kind of hobble from place to place, but for it being a 140-page book, the pace didn't stagnate too long in one area. It just kept it going, and for a book this length, that's what it should be doing. So I think on a lot of fundamental areas, this book gets a lot of huge check marks for me. But my only issue with this book is pretty much the last chapter or two. And here's why. This is a book where you can obviously tell that Stein came up with the title and wrote the ending before he wrote anything else. He wrote the very last chapter and then added everything else onto it. I can clearly tell. Because there's this concept here in this book that's kind of loose, and it's never really elaborated on at all, especially on Hannah's part, about how this locker operates. So how this ending unfolds is that, I don't want to spoil anything, but Luke and Hannah get this idea to go and try to confront whatever this Fate Master could be at, and try to destroy it, essentially. Right? That's as far as I'm going to go. I don't want to spoil anything. But the problem with that is the Fate Master the locker? Is the Fate Master the cat? What is the Fate Master? Is the Fate Master this skull? Is it all a product of each other? It's very loose, and the story never really explains that. It's all in context. You have to draw that conclusion there from context. And not to mention, the whole Hannah, how she got the skull to begin with, is never addressed in the book at all. So you have to assume that maybe Hannah was given the skull, or maybe she had the locker before. It's never really elaborated on. And if I'm not going to lie, it does take a little bit to get to the superstition stuff. It takes about 40 to 45 pages to really start that superstition stuff. It does a lot of backstory and exposition for the first 40 pages. So, yeah, this book is kind of flawed. Like I said, I had 1.5 flaws with it. And my main flaw is how obvious that the last chapter, or the last 2 chapters, was written before anything else of the book. Because how it ties together by the end just kind of comes off confusing in a couple of ways. But other than that, I still think this book is an excellent book. I think this book really comes to offer some gruesome scenes. It has, I didn't mention this in the plot overview. I don't want to spoil this, but there's a scene with blood. That's all I'm going to leave it at. And when you come to that scene, it'll make you squirm. Ear bleed type of thing during the concussion thing. Just keep your eyes out for that, because that's one of the best scenes in this whole book. I'm just now thinking about it. There's some really good body horror, supernatural stuff, superstition stuff, good characters, good character dynamics, just all around good stuff. So it's definitely getting a 4.5 or higher for me. And where I settled on this with my issues I have, I decided to deduct 0.4 off and give this book a 4.6 out of 5. This is a very exceptional book, and I am dying to try more Nightmare Room after this. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Nightmare Room, The Locker 13. Let me know down in the comment section if you have read this book. Do you love this, or do you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.